Ottawa is in absolute chaos today. The capital hasn't seen this kind of tension in years, not even during the last trade standoff with Washington. Ministers are reportedly canceling appearances, senior advisors are scrambling behind closed doors, and whispers from inside Parliament Hill suggest that something massive has just slipped through the cracks. Something that was never supposed to reach the public. I'm talking about what's being called the Emergency Budget Proposal, a leaked document that allegedly came straight from the Prime Minister's office. And if what's in it is even half true, this could shake the foundation of Canada's economy, its alliances, and its political future. Now, before we dive into the details, let's take a step back. Because for weeks, rumors had been circulating that Prime Minister Mark Carney was preparing an extraordinary fiscal maneuver, a plan to reset the economy before the next global market cycle hits. But no one really knew what that meant. Until now. According to sources close to the Finance Ministry, the so-called emergency proposal outlines sweeping measures, and I mean sweeping. Think aggressive spending cuts in certain sectors, radical new taxation on foreign holdings, and an unprecedented redirection of federal funds toward what's described as strategic national resilience. That's not typical government language. That's the language of crisis management. And yet, despite the magnitude of these alleged reforms, Ottawa hadn't breathed a word to the public. Not a leak, not a whisper, until late last night, when portions of the document began surfacing on encrypted policy forums used by former government staffers. Within hours, the political sphere in the capital went into meltdown. Cabinet officials, when confronted this morning, refused to comment. The Prime Minister's Communications Office released a one-line statement saying they don't respond to unverified documents. That's it. No denial, no reassurance, just a carefully worded deflection. Which, honestly, tells you everything you need to know. Because if this was truly fake, they'd say so. They'd shut it down immediately. But they didn't. And here's where it gets even stranger. A section of the document labeled Economic Containment Strategy appears to reference ongoing trade instability, particularly with the United States. It describes the U.S. administration's tariff pressures as a systemic risk factor and outlines a contingency plan for national economic self-stabilization. That's bureaucratic code for cutting ties, or at least preparing to. Now, here's what's making analysts nervous. This document doesn't just talk about emergency spending. It reportedly includes the framework for something called a National Reserve Transfer System. Essentially, this would redirect tens of billions from federal investment programs into a new, centralized economic fund outside of traditional parliamentary oversight. Think of it as an economic war chest, something Canada hasn't seen in modern times. And just as all of this was unfolding, U.S. President Donald Trump made a brief, unscheduled statement at the White House this morning, saying, quote, "Canada's going to have to make up its mind about what kind of partner it wants to be." No elaboration. No context, but the timing couldn't have been more deliberate. So here's what's being speculated inside Ottawa tonight. Was this leak accidental, or was it intentional? Some insiders believe it may have come from within Carney's own cabinet, possibly from a faction opposed to his economic overhaul. Because let's be real, an emergency budget of this scale doesn't just appear out of nowhere. It suggests long-term preparation, months of planning, and coordination across multiple ministries. If that's true, it raises serious questions. What exactly is the government preparing for? A major trade collapse? A currency shock? A shift in global energy markets? There's even quiet talk, and again, none of this confirmed, that Ottawa might be bracing for retaliatory tariffs from Washington after the breakdown in the last round of trade negotiations. And remember, Carney isn't just another politician. He's a former central banker, someone who understands the global financial system inside out. If he's moving to lock down the economy preemptively, that suggests he's seen something the rest of us haven't yet. Over the past week, the Prime Minister has noticeably avoided questions about federal liquidity. When asked about fiscal health during a press briefing, he simply said, "Canada remains stable and proactive in protecting its long-term economic interests." That word, proactive, suddenly feels a lot more significant. Meanwhile, reaction from the provinces has been explosive. Alberta's finance minister reportedly convened an emergency meeting this afternoon, calling the leak deeply concerning. Saskatchewan has demanded immediate clarification from Ottawa, while Quebec leaders are accusing the federal government of hiding a shadow budget from the public. In short, the country is on edge, and for good reason. If the emergency proposal is legitimate, it could mark the largest shift in fiscal policy since the 2008 financial crisis. But if it's not, then someone has just pulled off one of the most sophisticated political stunts in Canadian history. Now here's the twist that's driving speculation through the roof. The document includes a small section titled Foreign Response Forecasting. It references both the White House and something called U.S. contingency pathways. That phrase is rare, but policy analysts recognize it. It's typically used in classified modeling of cross-border economic conflict. So either Ottawa is bracing for a confrontation it knows is coming, or someone wants us to believe that it is. And that brings us back to the leak itself. Who benefits from this getting out? Opposition parties have been strangely silent, too silent. Normally they'd seize on a story like this in seconds. But this time, they're holding back. That suggests they might not know the full scope either. Or worse, that they do, and they're waiting to see how the public reacts first. Over the past few hours, several news networks have quietly confirmed that key financial institutions were briefed this morning under non-public advisories. That's unusual. Banks don't get looped in on ordinary rumors. Something is clearly moving behind the scenes. And yet, despite the growing panic, the Prime Minister has remained out of sight. No address to the nation, no live statement. Just a series of closed-door meetings at Langevin Block, where security has been visibly tightened all day. Staff members were seen entering without their usual press escorts. It's worth noting that this all comes at a politically sensitive time. Canada's economy has been under mounting pressure. Inflation cooling slower than expected, export disputes intensifying, and public trust in government spending at one of its lowest points in decades. The optics of a secret emergency budget couldn't be worse. Still, some financial experts are defending Carney, suggesting this might be a preemptive safeguard, a blueprint to protect Canada's economy from what could be an impending global downer. In that case, the leak could have jeopardized months of confidential preparation. But others aren't convinced. They argue that the timing is too perfect, too strategic, especially after Trump's sudden remark about Canada choosing its partner. Could the leak have been orchestrated to send a signal to Washington? A subtle warning that Ottawa is ready to act independently if trade relations deteriorate further? And if so, what's the next move? Because if the U.S. interprets this as economic defiance, the consequences could be severe. We're talking new tariffs, investment freezes, even capital flight. The last thing Canada needs is a market shock triggered by political brinkmanship. By late evening, as markets closed, the dollar had already slipped slightly against the U.S. currency, not dramatically, but enough to catch attention. Traders are cautious. They don't want to overreact, but they're watching closely for confirmation. And that's what makes this moment so volatile. There is no confirmation, no denial, just silence. A silence that grows heavier by the hour. You can almost feel it across Ottawa. The tension in the air, the unease among officials, the late-night lights burning in government buildings that usually go dark by sunset. Something is being decided right now. Something big. Whether this leaked proposal is real or not, it's clear that Canada stands at a crossroads. The political establishment has been shaken, public confidence is wavering, and the line between transparency and secrecy has never felt thinner. And perhaps that's exactly the point. Maybe this isn't just about economics at all. Maybe it's about control. Who truly holds the power when a nation faces financial uncertainty? Because one thing is undeniable, Ottawa has erupted. The Prime Minister's office is under pressure like never before. And whatever happens next, one question will hang over everything. Was this the first sign of a government preparing for crisis, or the beginning of one itself?